Small Steps, Chapter 15. Plans for a Pageant. In spite of my physical progress, I grew unhappy as Christmas approached. We added holiday songs to our nightly course, but somehow, while the other songs made me glad, singing Christmas carols made me lonely. Many nights when our music ended, I lay in the dark, trying not to cry as I thought of other Decembers. Mother always baked several kinds of Christmas cookies, and I knew I would soon have almond bells, Spritz cookies, and Russian tea cakes under my bed. But it wouldn't be the same. I wanted to hang around the kitchen, begging for bits of raw dough to eat. I wanted to burst in the door after school, stamping the snow off my boots and smelling spicy gingerbread boys fresh in the oven. I wanted to sit at the kitchen table surrounded by custard cups filled with colored frosting and tinted sugars and help Mother decorate the sugar cookies Santa stars. I wanted to help trim the tree and plunk out Away in a Manger on the piano. I wanted to shake my hoarded allowances out of my piggy bank and shop for gifts to surprise Mother and Dad and Grandpa and Art. I wanted to wrap up a dog treat for BJ and watch him sniff it and drool on the wrapping paper. In short, I wanted to go home. If I couldn't go home, I wanted to skip Christmas altogether and go straight into January. One night, as I lay wrapped in homesickness, I heard sniffling from across the room. Dorothy was crying too. We were lifted out of our depression by the goodwill and holiday spirit of the community. Carolers came frequently, and there were two wonderful parties, one put on by the Shriners and one by a group called the Aqua Jesters. Both groups provided clowns, music, and treats. For a few hours, we all forgot that we couldn't walk as we laughed at the clowns and applauded at the magic tricks and musicians. Even with all this excitement, I begged to be allowed to go home for Christmas. Just for 2 days, I said, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. We didn't get along so well the first time, Miss Ballard reminded me. It will be better this time, I insisted. If I don't go home, Santa won't know where to find me. Miss Ballard rolled her eyes, knowing full well that at age 13 I knew all about Santa Claus. Finally, I added the last-ditch, tried-and-true argument of kids everywhere. All the other kids are going home for Christmas. She gave me that look that said, no, they aren't. But she agreed to think about it. While I waited for her decision, I learned that the hospital was going to have a Christmas pageant with patients playing all of the roles. I was thrilled when Miss Ballard asked me to play the part of Mary, the mother of Jesus. You're tall for your age, she said, and Mary was young. Before I could get too big-headed about my important role, she added, and we need someone who can make it from the back of the room to the manger without any help. Who's going to be Joseph? Renee asked. His name was Kenny, and none of us knew him. He was in the men's ward, and we never ventured there. Kenny is being discharged the day after our pageant, Miss Ballard said. He is almost fully recovered and as strong as an ox. He can even walk by himself. The hospital's youngest patient, a 4-month-old boy, would play the part of Jesus. Patients who did not have roles were enlisted to make programs, angel wings, and halos. During the next few days, my sessions with Miss Ballard were full of conversations about the pageant. The plan was for an adult patient to read the Christmas story from the Bible while the characters silently enacted their parts, forming a tableau in the front of the OT room. I'd like to have some music too, Miss Ballard said. Not accordion music, I said. I understand there are some good singing voices in room 202. I wondered how she knew that, since our singing always took place at night after she had gone home. Maybe all of you could sing a song, she continued. Why don't you ask Alice to sing a solo, I suggested. She doesn't have a part in the pageant yet. Is she good enough, Miss Ballard asked. The whole hospital will be there, plus many visitors. No performer had ever been more enthusiastic agent than Alice had the day as I described her clear, bell-like voice. That afternoon, Miss Ballard asked Alice to sing a solo in the Christmas pageant. Me? Alice said. How do you know I can even carry a tune? I've heard reports from someone I trust. One of the nurses? Did a nurse tell you I can sing? Could be. Alice assumed that a nurse had talked to Miss Ballard, and I never let on that it was me. What did it matter who recommended her? The important thing was for her to be part of the pageant. What do you want me to sing? One of the familiar Christmas carols would be nice. Sing Silent Night, Renee said. I get chills every time you sing Silent Night. Yes, agreed Dorothy. You should sing Silent Night. Alice looked over at me. What do you think? She asked. You're the one who's had music lessons. Silent Night would be perfect. We had one rehearsal. All I had to do was walk from the back of the OT room to the front with Kenny beside me and sit on a chair. Start walking toward the manger when you hear the word taxed, Miss Ballard said. That's your cue. Kenny and I nodded. When all the actors were in place, Miss Ballard said, "Now everyone will stand perfectly still while Alice sings Silent Night. When she's finished, the pageant is over." Since no one had any lines to memorize, we only needed to go through it once, and Alice wasn't asked to sing for the rehearsal. On the evening of the pageant, dinner was served early. It might have been skipped entirely in our room since we were far too excited to care about food. We all warned Alice not to drink her milk. We didn't want phlegm in her throat, spoiling her voice. Dorothy, who was going to be an angel, fretted until the nurse in charge of angels showed up to help her into her wings. When it was time to leave, Alice panicked. "I can't do it," she said. "Not in front of all those people. What if my voice cracks? What if I forget the words?" "You won't forget the words to Silent Night," Dorothy said. "You've sung it to us 1,000 times this week. 100 times this week." "When it's time to sing," I told her, "close your eyes and pretend you're in bed singing only to us." "What if I go blank? What if nothing comes out of my mouth?" "That would be a historic first," Renee said. "I'm scared," Alice said, or whispered. "I'm afraid I'll goof up." "If you start to have trouble," I said, "I'll join in and sing with you. No one will know it wasn't planned." "Promise?" "Promise. But you won't goof up. You have the best singing voice I've ever heard." The OT room was the largest room in the hospital. That night it was crowded with patients, visiting family members, and staff. A spotlight shone on a crude crochet at one end of the room. Hospital beds, with the heads elevated, ringed the perimeter of the room like bent dominoes. Next were U-shaped rows of wheelchairs with adults in back and kids in front. My costume was an ankle-length hospital gown belted with a piece of rope. A long piece of deep blue fabric worn on my head and draped over one shoulder made me feel slightly more holy. Miss Ballard rearranged the material 3 times before it suited her. "You look exactly the way Mary would look," she declared. "Except for my feet," I said. "Mary didn't wear sandal shoes." "You need the support of sturdy shoes. I don't want Mary falling on her face before she gets to the manger." "I should be barefoot. Couldn't I go barefoot just for that short way?" "No," Miss Ballard said, and I knew by the way she said it that it would be wasting my breath to ask again. I waited with the other actors just outside the OT room door. I hardly recognized Kenny, who wore a long brown bathrobe, a fake beard, and a scarf pulled tight across his forehead and hanging down the back of his neck. I noticed that he was barefoot. "I thought you'd have a pillow under your dress," Kenny said. "You're supposed to be pregnant." It had not occurred to me. I asked Willie for a pillow. "No pillow," she said. "It could throw off your balance." Miss Ballard rushed out and said, "There's a problem. So many people came that they didn't keep the aisle as wide as they were supposed to. There isn't room for Mary and Joseph to go down side by side as planned." She looked at Kenny. "Joseph," she said, "you'll have to follow behind Mary." Opinions erupted like popping corn from the rest of the cast. "Mary and Joseph need to be together. We should have decorated a wheelchair to look like a donkey, and Kenny could have pushed her. Maybe somebody else should be Mary. Can't anyone here walk alone?" Nervous that I was going to be replaced the last second, I said, "If Kenny helps me, I can make it without my sticks." The babble of voices ceased, and everyone looked at Miss Ballard. "Without your sticks, you and Kenny would fit the aisle at the same time," she said. "If Kenny had his arm around your waist to support you, I think you could do it." Twice during my physical therapy sessions, I had walked short distances holding onto a metal bar attached to the wall while Miss Ballard stood on my other side with her arm around me for support. "Do you think you can keep her upright?" Miss Ballard asked Kenny. "Can you catch her if she stumbles?" "Yes," said Kenny, "as long as we use my good arm." There was no time to practice. The lights in the OT room dimmed, and the reader began. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. Taxed! I thrust my walking sticks at Miss Ballard. Kenny's arm went firmly around my waist, holding and lifting me so my feet barely touched the floor. "Are you sure you can make it?" Miss Ballard whispered. I nodded. I wasn't sure at all, but it was too late to change plans. Every eye in the hospital was watching us. To see what finds out, you'll have to come back for chapter 16.